Hello, everyone. It's Philip Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. And today I'm going to talk to you about the safeguards of tradition. Before I get into that, let me note that if you want to subscribe to the channel, click on the subscribe button below here and on the lower right. And in the far upper right, also click on the notification bell so that you'll be notified when new episodes are released. So let me pull up my notes and we'll get started on the safeguards of tradition. While youth is always susceptible to the narcissistic viewpoint that the ways of the past are outdated and should be given the heave-ho, tradition often serves as a safeguard against hasty and irrevocable changes. The destruction of Confederate statues on Richmond's Monument Avenue is one example. By viewing them almost entirely through the lens of race without any other consideration, today's ruling cultural elite felt justified in razing them. Just like a razor on your face, just raise them down to the surface. But the racial lens that they used in looking at those ignores many virtues of the men that were demonstrated by the men represented by those statues. Perhaps most important among such virtues was courage, without which all other virtues are meaningless. It's easy to have courage when you're not risking anything. Excuse me, it's easy to have virtue when you're not risking anything. But when you're risking everything, that's when it's hard to have virtue. That's why courage is the most important among all virtues. As noted in the previous posts that I've made earlier in the weeks past, Robert E. Lee's courage to accept full blame for his army defeat at the Battle of Gettysburg is a virtue sadly lacking among today's American leaders who decline to take responsibility for the Afghanistan debacle. Unfortunately, today's race-centric zeitgeist has devalued all virtues unrelated to race. Moreover, it has corrupted racial tolerance and converted it into a reverse racism. In fact, affirmative action is America's only legal discrimination presently, and it discriminates against white males most of all. That is why 68% of Princeton University's 2021 freshman class identified as so-called, quote, people of color, close quote. Evidently, the anti-white discrimination resulting from affirmative action in the propensity to get your application accepted became so dominant that many white applicants felt compelled to lie about their racial origins. As America's ruling elite escalate their assault on the merits of the Confederate soldier by removing statues of other conventional heroes, most recently in New York, those of Thomas Jefferson and Theodore Roosevelt, traditional norms retreat in other ways. One example is simple heterosexuality. A Gallup poll survey in February 2021, almost about a year ago, disclosed that 21% of respondents aged 18 to 23 did not consider themselves exclusively heterosexual. That 1/5 share of the so-called Gen Z age group, uncommitted to heterosexual normality, was the highest percentage of all age groups and had increased 60% over the previous decade. Such facts suggest three conclusions. First, the percentage of Gen Z Americans who do not consider themselves exclusively heterosexual is larger than generally supposed by many of us. Second, it is also growing faster than suspected. And third, the rejection of tradition is partly responsible for the first two conclusions. The role models our youth gets is from the Hollywood icons, and these people have lost respect for tradition. So having mates of the same sex and changing sexes and all that sort of thing is something that they advertise and that our youth finds is acceptable because, you know, the Hollywood stars do it. Now, G.K. Chesterton explained that tradition is the democracy of the dead. It is the accumulated wisdom of the ages. Flippantly dismissing Chesterton's wisdom may start with Confederate monument destruction, but it ultimately leads to other dubious movements such as defunding the police and gender fluidity. Granting, for purposes of argument, that gender confusion may be a reality among a portion of our youth, the parenthood tradition can be a safeguard against hasty decisions among the affected to irrevocably to prevent the irrevocable mutilation of their bodies and in a hasty attempt to change their genders. Girls who transition to boys may cut off their breasts, and boys wanting to become trans women may cut off their genitalia. Both may select irreversible hormone treatment. Thus, those who later regret such decisions may wish that traditions had remained in force to at least pump the brakes. The above is not to argue that tradition should never be replaced. I myself no longer trust traditional news media to tell the truth. It does argue, however, that the abandonment of tradition should be given long and serious consideration from multiple perspectives, especially when the change is irrevocable, as it was on Monument Avenue and is with gender transition. Consider the wisdom of a Basuto proverb popularized by Robert Ruark when he wrote about the African Mau Mau uprising of the 1950s. If a man does away with his traditional way of living and throws away his customs, he had better first make certain that he has something of value to replace them. There is not much of value in customs that promote hasty body mutilations and prosecution policies that release criminals to repeatedly loot cargo trains, as presently seen in Los Angeles. So what I'd like to do now is to share something with you. Here we go. Causes of the Civil War by Philip Lee. As you know, I write a number of books on the Civil War and Reconstruction. This one is particularly important because it tells you the causes of the Civil War from an objective perspective. It holds both the North and South responsible. It doesn't just hold the South responsible. So this book you can get at Amazon and Barnes & Noble for $22. If you'd want an autographed copy, then contact me and I'll sell you an autographed copy for $25 here if you live here in the United States, and I will cover the delivery costs. Okay, and on all my books, if you one of the things you can do to really help us is to give them 5-star ratings if you like them. It really helps us. We don't have a university press behind us. We have to attract buyers pretty much on our own, and attracting buyers helps spread the word. So if you'd like to do that, please do so. It really helps us out. Okay, that's our show for today, and thanks for watching.